Now we've got a quorum. All right. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock on the dot. First item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oops, sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rennick is running late, so that's why I'm starting, but he'll be here. Introductions. We'll start.
All right, Don Collins, Swanton.
Megan Conley, Swanton.
Elaine Nestor, Highgate.
Joanne Johnston, Franklin.
Eric Becker, Highgate.
Steve Messier, MVU.
Stephanie Gagne, Swanton.
Wendy Cunningham, District.
Bonnie Moulton, District. Julie Regenball, Superintendent.
Yashua Pasina, Highgate.
Derek. And a cord became loose or something.
That's why we keep him around. So I didn't see any visitors on. Tanya's on there, but any correspondence or public comment that anyone got? Okay. Next item is the agenda review. We are skipping number 9. There we go.
It's on.
Volume one.
It is working now.
It's good.
Do we want to introduce?
Yes,
them, or-
we don't have any new professional hires today, so we'll just skip over that agenda item. We will next time.
All right. So approval of the minutes from the May 27th meeting. Looking for a motion to approve.
And you go ahead and get the motion, and I'll tell you what I want to tell you.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. There's a second. I'll second since I was there. Okay, any discussion?
Yep, and I had my computer in my hand, I went back to the telephone call, but when we had the students here with the awards, were the students noted in our minutes that got the one person was there that got the award, but the other person was there via video? And as I say, I had it in front of me and I said, I don't find the names.
Oh, we should,
I don't normally note the names of kids in minutes, but I can.
No,
put them in.
I was
have it
like,
in
should
past
we or
practice
should we
with the
not with
FFA
parents?
and things like that, put children's names in there.
I just don't know how important it is to the students, so we can leave it, but I raised that issue. The other one was, and I do this, and then I slap myself, but we use the word kids, and that's probably what we said, was kids, but I would prefer to see in minutes it be students.
I can check. I don't know what
I
it
mean, I
says.
catch myself doing it, but
I do feel like it was students in the
says-
minutes.
well, it was
what
kids.
I'm looking for says students, where one student was present, the other,
It was farther down in the minutes, anyway.
well.
If you find it.
We will look for that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from May 27th, say aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Aye.
Abstain.
So 302
Mhm.
or 320?
302.
All right. Next up is the administrative reports. So we have both MVU and the central office in the drive. MVU admin isn't here because
Because it's a Highgate meeting.
yeah.
And
'cause
there
we're
were
in
10
Highgate.
meetings with them and 3 meetings with Highgate, so.
Right.
We're trying to be equitable. Also, given the fact that they have events probably every night between now and
The concert
They have a
there.
concert
There's a
tonight.
concert
Yeah.
tonight, there's concert tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So absolutely, but if there's anything in there that you have a question about, please let us know and I'll be happy to let Christy and Dan know if they have any questions.
So then, are there any questions for central office, or anything that you wanted to highlight? I know it was a long one. It was filled with some really great year in reviews, which I found helpful. I didn't have any specific questions though. Did anybody else?
No, sounded good.
I will just say that the legislative stuff you all are aware of, you know, I knew that as I was putting it in last week, that it would be completely different by the next week. So, you know, we know that it's
From the
conference committee stopped and they're gonna be doing some work outside and, until there's the, veto session on June 16th. So that's what we know about that.
From the time you started typing,
Oh,
till you got to the bottom of the page, it changed.
Friday night, we were sending emails to people. It was, you know, it's a very dynamic time.
Yep, it's good.
Kosha will be at the next board meeting, so if you have, because she has a big presentation next week, I wanted to make sure I was being equitable. But Tanya and Wendy are both here if you have any questions for them or any questions for me.
Is there anything that you'd like to highlight? I'll start with Wendy because she's right in front of me.
And I made eye contact.
That's right.
So we did a little kind of year in review, and I don't recall if I included it or not at the end of mine, but we did get our first results back from our STARS application. You may recall I reported earlier in the year that we were going to apply to renew our STARS. It's a new system of doing that. We chose to apply because it's a no-fault year this year, and we could learn the system, get some feedback, and then we would be set with our STARS, and that would give us some time. So we got our first results back, and it is for our Highgate site, and it's not a surprise we got 5 stars because that's what we had. But it was really great feedback about the quality of our program, and 2 areas for us to look at when we renew next time. We are confident that we have evidence for those things. They're not things that we're not doing. It's just, it was our first time providing the evidence to them. So that was really reassuring to the team, so there's a lot to celebrate there.
Is STARS under pressure from the Agency of Education?
It's always being looked at. I think there is some pressure because they launched this whole new way of looking at it as a result from feedback from the field. For years after the STARS program started, feedback was coming in that it wasn't really measuring what we were looking for high quality publicly funded pre-K and childcare to look like, right? So I think there's always pressure. They launched this big revamp of it. And then it started, and they will sit with you in a meeting and say, we are really building this plane while we're flying it. So I think there's definitely some pressures. But again, all in all, they put out enough information for us to be able to feel like we could get through the process of the renewal. And I do have to say that the things that it looks at are more closely aligned to what we are striving for in our programs. Instead of kind of checking off a list or jumping through some paperwork hoops, it really does get at the heart of what we're looking for in our classrooms. And one of the things that really did shine for our program, and our first results back, and I know it will shine as well for Franklin and for Swanton, is our results from our classroom assessment scoring system. We scored really well, and those are that's the tool that measures the quality of adult-child interactions, and that's just, it's so essential to the foundation for kids coming to school and learning. So
Good, thank you.
Thank
I asked
you.
the question because when this whole thing with STARS started, and I know probably nobody's in the agency now, but some of our, but they were not in favor of it. And along the way, a lot of people weren't in favor of it, but I was.
I always wish they called it anything but stars, and that's because for consumers, when you hear of something that could have 5 stars but doesn't, you say, oh, 3-star hotel, I don't want to stay there. But it really does, any program that is participating in STARS is going above and beyond the basic safety regulations that are required to be licensed. So even a program with 1 star is better, but you would hear that, you'd be like, oh, it must stay in there. So I do wish they had called it anything but that, but they kept that.
I don't know
the
how they got
rename.
that name.
Yep.
Somebody liked the acronym.
Step ahead recognition system. So,
Oh, that's really what it stands for?
yeah.
Yeah, the state loves acronyms.
Yep. But anyway, thank you for letting me share about that. I know our scores for Franklin and Swanton will be the same because it's the no fault, but I'm glad we went through it. And anytime you go through a new thing like that, it is, a little anxiety inducing for staff. So now we've been through it. Our pyramid model leadership team is still intact from the work that we did over several years with Pyramid 802. The leadership team is reviewing the feedback and making a plan for our program sites to work together so that when our next round comes, we have to have a continuous improvement plan basically in place. So we'll be ready.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Tanya, is there anything that you wanted to highlight?
I don't think there's any highlights. It's just an update on where we're at with alternative programming, which is, kind of going with a couple of different options for now in terms of what the next step is for us. But depending on the variables, I think it's all in there. As far as the update goes, are there any questions about that?
Are we adding or losing any alternative services or programs? Julie, did we have a new one last year open for serving students
You mean,
in St. Albans area? Was there a new?
a few years ago, we do have a school
Right,
called Brightality in St. Albans. That still exists. Of course, there's also SOAR.
Yeah.
But there's still the moratorium, so there's no new schools, independent schools opening up. But that's why many of us are trying to create our own, we're not trying to recreate, and Tanya very smartly, because she is,
so they did,
is not trying to recreate, another therapeutic day school setting, because that's what mental health agencies do so well. But trying to create hands-on, place-based learning, where students will perhaps be a little bit more successful and engaged, small groups of kids. And I appreciate the work engaging with a wide variety of stakeholders to find out what the gaps are, and she's excited about perhaps using the wildlife refuge to get kids outside. So her commitment to outdoor education is I think second to none around here. So
That is actually the one thing, I don't have a question, just a comment that I read about your hope to do more of the nature based, and that just made me so happy because I know how effective it is and how, like, just thinking back, I don't remember where we were. It wasn't Swanton, but it was one of the other elementary schools where we had the family come in who
It
had
was
been.
here.
It was here.
It was,
Okay.
you're right.
And they'd been working with Miss Kurt, right? And just
Yeah.
complete turnaround of that student, and that really resonated with me. So I'm so pleased to read that you're trying to continue that and expand that.
Yeah, and I think that, that kind of was a little bit of a pilot, if you will, right? Like we kind of tried to see how it was gonna work in the school setting, and I think we're just getting really kind of focused now on the idea of it's the social emotional skills as the intervention, and that could be a special ed service, that could be a specialized instruction. It's just we're trying to make it happen in a different environment that's highly engaging and regulating and helps kids focus on sustained attention and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about how the pieces are all coming together, and I think we're fortunate in that we have partners around us, right? We have Kurt accessible to support some of it until we can find our own teacher. We have the Wildlife Refuge, and they're very willing to have us on site and use their space. And I reached out to another organization yesterday that supports classrooms with building indoor hydroponic gardens, right? And that they'll actually come and support us to build a therapeutic garden or a garden that's accessible to students with autism. a sensory garden, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of different resources that we can call upon with various expertise, and I think it's I think piece by piece, little by little, it's coming together. So it's pretty exciting for me as well.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for anyone? All right. So we're on to the presentation. So I think then if you guys want to head out, you're welcome to. If you want to stay, you're welcome to do that too.
Okay, we're all gonna watch Julie try and share.
Right.
Something always goes awry, it feels like.
It's our entertainment.
I don't wanna be that person.
Do we have any videos this week?
No,
No
thank
videos.
goodness, no videos. That was,
I put one in
How
mind, Derek.
many-
I'll say it out loud. I didn't know there was a no video edict, so.
how many professionals does it take kind of situation? All right, half the problem is I have too many tabs open all the time. Why is the wrong thing?
You
Say, was there a
you
second
started
ago?
on the right
Yeah.
one. I saw it.
There we go.
When I move to present mode to do full screen, then it gets weird. Let's try it.
So
One-
actually, that is,
Now it works.
that's the one from December. So same format, it looks very similar, but it should be a newer version.
Mr. Mess.
Is that the one that's in the
Agenda?
Probably.
Yeah, I didn't make it a drive,
Oh.
but it's the one that's on the agenda.
I will,
I didn't like anything.
Oh, it is linked in the agenda.
I just did that, I do that so that I can,
Check the drive.
so that I can link it and share it more easily without this nonsense occurring. But what I can do, and Mr. Messier suggested, is I can just show the PDF, and that might be a little easier, so I will do that.
All right.
Just make it.
Well, good evening, everyone. So obviously just wanted to kind of bring together some of our end of the year behavior data. When we met back in, or when we chatted in the December meeting, we started talking a little bit about just all of the work that we had been doing over the last couple of years, both in the middle and the high school, that kind of led to what I felt at the time were some pretty substantial gains behaviorally across the school, and again, going back for a couple of years. But in that next slide, this was actually one of the things that we chatted about back in December, was some of that work really took on some committee work at the front end of it, and then that led into some faculty work throughout the course of last school year. We actually dedicated one of our monthly meetings to do some of this kind of social emotional behavioral work across all of our faculty and staff. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there. Nothing has changed on that slide from December, but just to kind of ground us in, that's the work that's really ongoing. So there's no necessarily a destination to arrive to, but just kind of that ongoing process. Overall, some really positive things to share. And I know when we chatted in December, we were looking at kind of year-to-date data up to December 3rd, and then reviewing it kind of in context to last year's data. Obviously, we don't have this current week or next week's data for the entire school year, but I think it's a pretty good snapshot and gives us a good idea of kind of where things are at. So specific to the middle school, you'll see that last year we had 530 total referrals for the school year. And we're down to about 485. So, give or take another handful over the course of this week and maybe the first couple days of next week. I still think comfortably we'll be below 500 for the year, which in the grand scheme of things, a reduction in 30 referrals over the course of 2 grade levels is pretty substantial. And so the one thing that I'll key in here is you'll notice that the distribution of major versus minor behavior and how we kind of identify that is up slightly. And I think, again, that goes back to some of that calibration work that we have continued to do with our staff around, what is classroom managed behavior? What are some things that as a teacher you're kind of taking that first level of response? And then what are the things that office staff and our behavior staff are going to then support? So I don't know that we've got a drastically different intensity of behaviors from one year to the next, but I think just the way in which we're kind of documenting and then ultimately responding to those referrals, just from a paperwork standpoint, so to speak, is slightly different. So, but again, overall, really positive to see that total number go down. And then you'll see in the next slide kind of the breakdown of some of the larger ticket issues that we're seeing. So again, a slight increase in property destruction. I don't necessarily think that is because we've seen more of it. I think we're better identifying and labeling some of the things that we're seeing. So historically, we would really, when we labeled property destruction, it was really more kind of the physical space and the chairs, the tables, the walls, those types of things within the school. Now we've added Chromebook issues as a part of that property destruction piece, so that if it's like a willful destruction versus just an accident, then that's going to fall into that category as well. So a slight uptick there, but you'll see in every other category a pretty significant reduction. So drug, alcohol, and vape issues in the middle school went from 26 to 16. Substantiated issues of bullying and harassment, actually that I'll give an update. So the 9 is actually a 10. We had one more today. So still from 20 to 10 is a really significant number in reduction. And then you'll see the one that really surprised me the most was the bus referrals. So we're at 84 referrals for the middle school last year and down to just 23 in grades 7 and 8 this year. So really, really significant reduction there. And again, I don't know, it's kind of hard to decide or determine if there's any one specific thing that leads to that or has led to that. I don't necessarily think it is one thing. It's probably a culmination of a few, but I'll say anecdotally, I think the addition of cameras with audio in our buses, or at least in a good portion of our buses, have been a huge benefit and a huge help to us as we're kind of responding to issues and being able to better identify what's going on in the buses. So again, overall in the middle school, really positive data to report, and something that I think should be definitely a celebration.
Can I ask a quick question on
Sure.
the previous?
Yeah.
You mentioned substantiated bullying and
Yeah.
harassment. Can you explain how an accusation is substantiated?
Yes, and there's about 4 or 5 slides at the end that we're going to talk about HHB. So I don't know
Okay.
if you want to wait and I can
Yeah,
just kind of
that's
walk
fine.
through that process.
Yep.
Yeah. So the number there is the substantiated. So not necessarily reports, not necessarily investigations that have taken place, but those that have been found to have been a policy violation. That's the number.
Okay.
Yep. And then kind of shifting to the high school, you'll see again kind of a breakdown between major and minor by cohort. So we're at just over 1,400 total referrals for last school year, and just slightly over 1,100 total referrals for the high school this year. So a really, really significant drop. And you'll see kind of, again, the breakdown by grade levels. So last year's 9th grade, this year's 10th grade, still significant reduction in both the major and minor behaviors as we're tracking them. And again, I don't necessarily think it's any one thing. I think we have done a lot of work with our faculty and staff around strategies and interventions and the tools that they have available to them, both at the classroom level and then kind of in the office level, so to speak. And I'll make kind of a quick plug and a thank you to the staff that work in my department. We've got some really great folks, and they have now been there. So Kylie Ashton and Victoria Bella, the SEL coordinators, this is their 2nd year in those roles. They are wonderful. They built a ton of great relationships with kids and with staff and colleagues. They've been a huge, huge resource and asset to the work that we're doing. The consistency of having Carol Hakey in her role, and just, I think, again, overall having the same kind of friendly faces that our staff or that our students are working with repeatedly. We can kind of be proactive and we can get ahead of issues before it gets to the point of a referral needing to take place or some issue actually having to occur. So a huge plug to that group and the work that they're doing. So I think a big piece of that reduction is from their work, and a big piece of that reduction is the classroom level teachers doing a really great job of managing things on their end, so that, again, we're addressing issues on the smaller end before they turn into really more significant issues. So overall, a really positive thing. You know, a 300 or so reduction from one year to the next is substantial. Dan and I were chatting today. I think it was about 5 years ago that we crested 2,000 referrals in the high school. So the fact that we're just about half of that, or just over half of that now, in the span of 5 years, really, really substantial. So again, something to celebrate and be proud of on that front for sure.
Is the SRO part of any of this?
No, so this is just behavior data. So, well, I'll say there's a little bit of overlap as it relates to like our drug, alcohol, and vape process, because there may be times when the SRO will need to like provide a citation for one of those infractions. But this is really just kind of classroom and school-wide behavior that, you know, we don't necessarily need or include Dean as a part of that process. He's really just kind of following up on criminal issues or threats, those types of things.
What triggered it in my mind, you talked about your team and how they build relationships with students. And whenever Dean has come in, he talks about building relationships with students.
Yeah, and so thank you for that reminder, because I would be remiss if I didn't include Dean, because he is a big piece of that puzzle, even though he's not responding to student behavior or supporting classroom teachers. Having, again, that friendly face, that consistent person who students can go to and kind of have as a sounding board or as somebody to provide guidance, hugely impactful. So that is a big piece of the puzzle as well, for sure. I also included here for the high school some cell phone data. That was one of the things that we chatted about back in December as well. So again, you'll see overall a pretty significant reduction in the amount of cell phone infractions. And one of the things, again, that I just want to key in on this slide is the reduction in recidivism, right? So we have a lot of kids who have had that first offense, and less as time wears on, kids needing that second, third, and more reminder to kind of meet that expectation and follow that guideline. So I'm sure you guys have probably talked about where the state is headed with cell phones and what that's going to look like. I think we've been on the front end of that and the leading edge of that process and that response for quite a few years. So great to see that the state is kind of taking that on, but I think we're going to be in a much better place in a couple years, on even better than we already are on this, because we are very comfortable, and staff have been pretty consistent with kind of providing that expectation and following through. So I think the growing pains around that, I think for us, are largely over, whereas I think a lot of other schools are going to be just kind of seeing the beginning stages of that process over the next couple of years. So again, just something that we wanted to highlight. And then that breakdown, similar to what we talked about in the middle school from some of the big ticket items. So property destruction about level. Again, drug, alcohol, and vape issues down significantly. Fighting up a little bit. Again, I think part of that is just us better identifying and then labeling some of the issues that we have. A little behind the scenes. So when we have staff, either classroom teachers or our office staff, are completing referrals, a lot of times we'll have one incident that captures or is identified in multiple buckets of behavior, so to speak. So I think, again, we're doing a better job of identifying something that might be otherwise or previously listed as, let's say, physical aggression, and now we're labeling it as physical aggression and fighting if it warrants that, right? So I don't necessarily think it's a huge uptick specific to that behavior, but just us doing a better job of kind of outlining and identifying that. Bullying and harassment in the high school, pretty level as far as substantiated cases from year to year. Tardy class cuts, I'll sound like a broken record, but again, I think that's just us doing a better job of identifying and labeling and tracking that. And then similar to the middle school, bus referrals down in half. So a really significant reduction in the high school bus referrals as well.
Nice.
All right. So to speak to your question, Megan, around hazing, harassment, bullying, so just kind of a general overview. I know this is something that comes up, or you guys probably field questions on somewhat, consistently or regularly. So our bullying and harassment policy, or hazing, harassment, and bullying process, is pretty prescriptive. This again is, a state mandate, and they provide a model policy, and then we just kind of, put our own kind of flavor on it, but it is really pretty consistent with that state level process. So we're mandated each year to do a certain level of proactive education and awareness. So we do that both with our faculty and staff during our August in-service process, and then we do classroom meetings and kind of student level education, both in broad kind of grade level cohort meetings, and then individually in some of our nests as well. This is a slide, or a kind of a graphic that we use a lot with kids, that just helps them better understand kind of, is the thing that's happening or that I'm a part of, does that qualify as bullying? And if not, then why not? And kind of this is a nice way to help them understand and break down some of the peer issues that they're having, and better identifying some of the issues as potentially being something that we would have to formally investigate. So again, within that process, this is again something that we use as kind of a training graphic for both students and staff. And you'll see this comes from the Vermont Civil Rights Training Council, and just again helps students hopefully be able to identify where the behavior that they've either been subject to or engaging in themselves, where that falls kind of on the continuum, whether that's considered just rude and disrespectful behavior, or as it kind of moves forward from bullying to harassment, what the 9 protected categories, it's a little fuzzy there, but you'll see the 9 protected categories in that bullet in the 3rd column, and again, just hopefully helps kids better understand kind of what that is, what that looks like, and most importantly, the next few slides about how to receive help, and how to identify and make a report, and then what our process is for conducting those investigations.
Steve, one thing that I always try to point out when somebody's asking me about it is, you asked about substantiated. Mm-hmm. Even if something is not substantiated as bullying or as harassment, that doesn't mean it didn't break the code of conduct,
sure.
And that people are having consequences and it's being addressed. So even the mean behavior that doesn't qualify under a state or federal definition of something doesn't mean it's not being addressed.
Right. Yep, good point. And so kind of within that, part of that training process and awareness that we provide for staff every year is making sure that they understand that everybody who works in our building, no matter what your role, you are a mandated reporter, and you have an obligation to kind of follow through with this process. If you become aware of it, whether you've observed something or a student has directly reported something to you, they then have an obligation at that point to immediately document. If they're witnessing something happening, they have an obligation to stop it in the moment. But beyond that, we kind of walk them through what the reporting process is, and then what the reporting timeline is, because the formal investigative process is very prescriptive, specific to timelines. So when that behavior first happens, we have an expectation for staff that they're going to immediately document it. We have what's called the student conduct form, which they need to fill out, and then provide that form to one of a handful of designated employees, which you'll see on one of the following slides. Once that form has been filled out, the clock has officially started, and we have 24 hours to determine whether or not we're going to open a formal investigation, or if it might not meet the standard or the threshold of needing to be formally investigated, and if not, what other steps are we going to take to address that, whether it's as a code of conduct violation or some other kind of preliminary inquiry to address that. So again, we'll walk staff through that, give them copies of the form each August, and kind of make sure that they're aware of their obligations individually. And then obviously the designated employees that you'll see in the next slide all have kind of a higher level or more significant level of training about what their process is, or what their kind of role in that process is at that next level. So basically from there, those designated employees will receive that student conduct form, help determine, usually within kind of the context of having a conversation with one of the building administrators, to determine, is this something that needs to be formally investigated, and if so, then the designated employees have a specific form that they need to fill out. give that to one of the building administrators, and then a formal investigation is initiated. An investigator is assigned by Dan or Christy to kind of look into those claims.
So this is based off of like a staff member, an employee witnessing something, correct?
Could be, or it could be a student report as well.
So a student
Yep.
would go, so the student, if a student feels like they've been bullied, they have to bring that to the attention of anybody.
Any adult, yep,
Any
any
adult.
adult, and then that adult is mandated to
To fill out the
to
form.
fill out the form and then share that concern with the designated employee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve,
That's, I think, the thing that happens, like, there's no expectation that a child knows who the designated employee is.
Right.
Tell a teacher, tell an adult, go to the principal, go to Mr. Messier, that, and then that adult is trained to make sure it gets followed up with appropriately.
so the names there are the designated adults.
Yep, so Alyssa Graves, our health, or our nurse, our registered nurse. Devin Quinlan, who was behavior staff a few years ago, is now the 504 coordinator. Debla Murray, one of our high school counselors. Dan, Christy, Victoria, and Kylie, who work in my office, and then myself. So those are the handful of designated folks. Every school has to identify designated employees within their building to kind of work through that process.
So just to follow up on that. These people are employees, but in our school, we have food service, NCSS, people, and probably others that I don't know about.
Yeah.
Are they also informed of their responsibility?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's part of that beginning of the school year kind of walkthrough and identification process. Yep. Yep. So again, once that investigation has been initiated, again, it goes back to that formal process of the timeline. We have 5 school days or business days to conduct that investigation unless there's extenuating circumstances that are present that we would have to document. But usually we would initiate that, that from that initial report to the staff to the time we open an investigation, usually no later than 24 hours. We have a 24-hour window from when we determine that an investigation needs to take place before we have to formally notify families of it. But that process is usually much more condensed than that, and it all happens within the course of a day to the next day. So again, Dan or Christy will assign an investigator for following up on that. This year, I've been handling majority of the middle school investigations. Victoria and Kylie have been doing a majority of the high school level investigations. But once that process begins, obviously we have notifications to parents, potentially steps that we have to take to remove or eliminate contact of the respondent or the complainant in lieu of the investigation being completed. So that often takes the form of like a no contact safety plan. So if students are in class together, then they're provided an expectation and notification to parents that they're not allowed to interact with or speak or work in small groups with that student during the course of the investigation. And then all of the investigative processes kind of begin from there. So interviews with, usually, at least my process is, I usually first do an interview with the student who is the complainant or the person who could be labeled as the victim. And then I'll have them actually identify potential witnesses, meet with those witnesses, talk to any other adults who might be nearby, classroom teachers, support staff, other folks that might be aware. And then lastly, my last interview usually in the process is the respondent, so the student who's being accused of the behavior. So again, from start to finish, unless there's extenuating circumstances, that will take place over the course of 5 school days. Once we get to the end of that investigative process, we'll draft a report, sit down with Dan or Christy, review kind of the findings or the information that we gathered, and then a determination is made as to whether or not it is considered a policy violation or not. As Julie mentioned earlier, there are lots and lots of times when we might not have a behavior that has met the threshold of being considered bullying and harassment, but it is unwanted peer behavior that we otherwise have to address through the code of conduct. So that process will happen, notifications will be made to parents, and then any other safety planning or follow-up from there takes place with school administrators and the family and the students from that point. And again, just that last slide is around kind of our obligations. And so this is some of the language that we include in notifications, both on the front end of that parental notification and then thereafter. So we have an obligation of staff to obviously stop the behavior from happening if we're witnessing it. But then once we become aware that behavior or conduct that has become a policy violation, we have to mitigate the likelihood that it takes place again. So again, oftentimes that takes the form of not just kind of the traditional consequences, but education. So we do a lot of SEL kind of focused work with respondents that speak to those skill deficits to hopefully reduce the likelihood that they engage in that behavior again. And then lastly, obviously taking steps to remedy the effects on the complainant. So whether that is connecting them with their guidance counselor, setting up kind of some follow-up work, or again, some safety planning, some no contact plans, could take any or all of that process thereafter. The nice thing, and I didn't include this specifically in the breakdown of the substantiated claims, but specific to this year, at least in the middle school I'll speak to, we have only had one case of a student engaging in substantiated bullying and harassment repeatedly. So out of the 10 investigations that we've substantiated, 2 have been the same student, but all of the others are kind of isolated or at least one-offs. So as it relates to the recidivism factor, I think the steps that we're taking, the education that we're providing on to respondents thereafter seems to at least be making some inroads and some gains on that. So.
Does anyone else have questions? I do, but.
I don't have any questions, I have a comment, but go ahead.
Do we have any information on how students perceive this process? Like, do we know if students are like, this is just like bogus and nothing ever comes of it? Or do we know that they're like, yeah, I feel like I was heard and...
Anecdotally, I would say it's probably a mixed bag. So I think a lot of the times we'll hear, or at least I'll hear in conversations with kids around like, well, why, this has been going on for months, or this has been going on for several weeks, and once we learn about it, it's, a conversation is, well, why aren't we, why didn't you say something earlier? And it's often, well, one of two things. One, I didn't want it to get worse, and I was worried that if I reported it was going to get worse, or I didn't think anything was going to happen, right? And so I think generally once we start to explain and help kids understand that, yes, something happens, it's a really formal process, and then the effects are hopefully remedied. Hopefully they get to a point where they're more comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. We've never collected data around that specifically. We did do a student survey at the end of last year, and then again in the fall, around kind of well-being and belongingness and kind of all of the other SEL kind of buckets, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But we did that questionnaire, that survey didn't touch upon HHB specifically. Okay. But it is something that's interesting, right? I'd be curious as to what their general belief would be.
It stems because I know I was recently made aware of an MVU student who has decided not to return, like they're going to be homeschooled because of bullying. And I don't know any of the details, if it was reported, if it wasn't, whatever it is. It was brought to my attention, and so instantly I'm like, well, okay, I want to make sure that they've gotten the support, assuming that they went through the proper channels. And then in a case like that, is there any sort of outreach from the school to try to encourage them to come back to the community and be here again? Because it breaks my heart that we would lose even one student who doesn't feel. Yeah,
as far as kind of outreach for kids that have transitioned to other kind of learning opportunities, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. One of the challenges that we do run into is obviously because we have certain privacy guidelines around student conduct and the reporting of that student conduct. Mm-hmm. One of the issues that does come up somewhat frequently is that when we do substantiate it, we can't tell the parents or the student who is the victim or the complainant what the consequences were for the other student. So that becomes a challenge because we can say we've addressed it, we've done a thing, but we can't tell them what or how that manifests. That's very frustrating for folks, right? For students and their families, which I totally understand. And yet federal privacy guidelines prevent us from being able to communicate that. So I'll go out on a limb and say I'm guessing a fair amount of frustration on the heels of a formal investigation are probably connected to that lack of our ability to be transparent around
Right,
those
'cause they
follow-ups.
want a net.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
On another note, and it wasn't this year, it was last year, a youngster who had parents that felt were harassed and bullied in the elementary school in Swanton, and probably because they weren't told what the other kid got for punishment.
Right.
And it would. They were, I would say, critical, but dropped it there.
Yeah.
But came to MVU, and the mother saw me in the grocery store, which is not the place to talk about it. But I let her go because she was very happy with what you were doing.
Great. Well, and again,
She didn't know your name, but she said that ball-headed guy.
there's a few of us for what it's worth, but no, and I
but it
think
was a
that's
nice compliment that he was being harassed, bullied, whatever, and you followed through, and he felt much safer going to school.
great. Well, and again, I think, we've done a lot of work around that, what I referenced before around like helping kids feel as though they're connected and belong to the school, so that we've got a certain level of trust built up with the kid and the parents, or the guardians to say like, you gotta have to trust us, right? Like we can't share you the details with you, but trust that our process is significantly thorough enough, and we've built that rapport with families to know that, when we say we've done a thing, they're gonna believe that something has been done and that we've kind of taken measures. So good to hear, and hopefully more folks will kind of understand and appreciate that dynamic as time wears on. Yeah.
I don't think I have a question, but I know I have a comment that might turn into a question. So I noticed the numbers really dropping when we were looking at the high school, starting with our freshmen and our seniors, was hardly any, issues. So, and I'm sure, I'd like to think our seniors are getting more mature as they, go through the grades and life. But they're also there less.
For sure.
So
Yep.
is it a mixture of both
100%.
or it's okay?
Yeah, and I think that's just, so yes, the natural maturation process of, by the time really, I would say, Dan kind of jokes, the holiday break of sophomore year, when they come back after the first of the year, there's just like this natural timeline where kids tend to grow up more. So as they get older, we definitely see less and less issues that need that level of support. But yeah, to your point, the seniors are just in the building less, whether it's work-based learning or any of a number of things. They're spending less time there, so less opportunity for issues, peer issues. But yeah, I think the bulk of the work and interventions that we're doing are grades 7 through 10, and then it kind of peters out from junior to senior year. Yeah.
Anything else?
That's a really interesting comment. I'm going back 50 years ago when my bus drivers used to tell me that the worst kids to pick on younger elementary kids, the little kids, were like junior high kids. They would be after the younger kids. And I never thought much about it, but when you're talking, that's basically what you're saying.
Well,
7, 8, 9,
and
10.
prior to this year, a bulk of my time was spent with high school students, right? So this year I've had a little bit more of interaction and kind of gaining a better understanding of middle school students. And it's a totally different social dynamic. They're still trying to figure out who they are and kind of where they fall in the pecking order socially. And so a lot of the issues that we have peer-to-peer in grades 7 and 8 are drastically different than the peer issues we had grades 9 through 12. So it's been an interesting learning curve for me to just better calibrate my responses and better understand kind of the mind of a 7th or 8th grader, which is a dangerous place to be sometimes. Yeah.
As a mother of an 8th grader, yeah, it is.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Of course.
I really appreciate you doing, I asked Steve to do the HHB piece at the end too, and I really just, it's a time of year.
Sure.
So it was a great opportunity for you to give that overview.
Good job, Steve.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Eric is up next.
Perfect timing.
Let's see if I can make that slideshow work.
There's a video, so if I have to wing it, I will.
Oh.
Really, don't worry.
presentation, but Steve, you ready
Share
to go?
sound.
Yeah, he's gotta do it again.
It's on the
Oh,
video.
shut
It's
my
on the
computer
video.
off.
It's on the video.
Well, of course, it's I'm gonna tell you that Steve and I coordinated, and this is totally how we planned it, and this coordinates really well into what he's talking about, but I wanted to spend a little time just talking about our work doing SEL here, because I think that's really ties into exactly what we're seeing. What we're trying to help our students do is learn a set of skills we all were naturally given through human interaction, which has been greatly reduced based on the world they live in. And so we're playing a little bit of a catch-up game because they get information in a very different way than a lot of the folks at this table did. And so we're having to reestablish a lot of things that I think I, as a slightly aging adult, I'm starting to recalibrate in my own head about sort of what should be there versus what's truly there and the perception with that. So
I am gonna just eliminate the audio portion of the share so that it doesn't echo all the way through what you're trying to
wonderful.
say. So that may mean the video's not gonna work.
That's okay. It was really just an introduction. I could talk people through it, but it's just nice
If you
to.
want to share it with me, Julie, I can share it.
Let's go.
You can go to the next slide, June. So about 3 years ago, the district had traditionally give a very traditional paper survey to students. How are you feeling? Do your teachers care about you? All important stuff, but very subjective to the day. Johnny had a great day on Monday. He gives 5, I don't want to say stars because we just talked about stars, but he gives a very high rating. You give that same kid the same survey Tuesday and it's a 1, right? Because it's subjective. And I asked the district when we started our district team, can we look at something that's more skills-based, where kids are given scenarios and tasks that really challenge the use of SEL skills in their assessment rather than how do you feel about this? Kosha was kind enough to do some research, and we've linked up with a company that does an assessment that's really skills-based. So just to give you an example, for some of our younger kids, there's a rocket ship and one goes really fast and you get 1 point, one goes medium speed and you get 3 points, and one goes really, really slow and you get 5 points. And if you can wait longer, you can get more points. So you start looking at how long are kids willing to be patient. There's a lot of scenarios like something happens at recess and they'll walk you through. Timmy pushes Johnny, what should you do? So a lot of opportunities to actually apply the skills in the assessment as opposed to just saying I do or don't know. And a lot of what you'll see is some very brief data. I'm not going to go through it all, but this is our early elementary, so it's broken up into K3 and then 4-6. The test is similar but slightly different what they look at. The very light green are your kids that are well above average. That's your kind of really got it figured out. Your second shade of green is your slightly above average. Your dark green is right there, and then your next green, and then your really dark green. So below average is the Kelly-ish green, and then the very bottom is your well below average. And you'll kind of see, so we give it every fall and every spring. So this is the first year, the fall of 22. The next side is the spring of 23, and you'll see a little bit of movement, but not a great shift in the color palette. What we're really shooting for, and you'll see I'll repeat that for 4 through 6. The next slide is the fall of 22 for 6th grade, 7 for our 4, 5, and 6th grade. Similar nice spread of colors, but you see some darker greens there really taking over. And then the next slide, you'll see similarly, some have shifted, but still more darker green than we'd like to see. So that was year 1, just calibrating, giving the test, understanding it, figuring out, working through the kinks. The next slide, you'll see similarly, we see a lot of reduction in the higher green, but increases in the mid-green and slightly less green, which is good. We want to see more kids moving up the continuum, not down. And then you'll see in the fall, similarly, some shifts around. And it's interesting because you see fall to spring, some of that dark green grows in color, even though it's a similar test. And that's not surprising. The timing is one of the things, unfortunately, we don't super control. So this particular year, this came right after we had given the VT cap, which was also the first year we'd given the VT cap. So just come off doing VT cap, and then we're asked to do this afterwards. So we weren't surprised to see that shift of like, here's another test online you have to do after doing a whole bunch of testing online. And you'll see similar results in the 4 to 6 range. Again, coming into it, really nice color spread, seeing a lot of those lighter colors. Loving to see that 20% really at the above average. That's a really nice marker. You'll see when we pop over to the fall. that starts to reduce a little bit, and the same through 4-6. So we started saying, okay, we see our students have some skills, but there's got to be more we can be doing because we're not seeing that growth we really want to see. So this school year, we've really said we've got to do something targeted, and as a district, we came up with priority standards, which I know the board has seen. But we decided, Yeshua and myself, we got to do a little more. You know, setting aside a couple of standards you want to focus on is nice, but we've got to give our kids as much exposure to this because they're doing it every day. It is a living part of who they are as students here, and we want to continue that transition to MVU. We want them to have more skills and more self-guided problem solving, so there are less need for things like teacher referrals and major disciplinary tactics, because most of those come from an inability to communicate what is directly impacting our students. So we really said this year we're going to do direct instruction. So every Wednesday morning, first thing, our entire school stops and does about 30 minutes of direct SEL instruction. And it's not just the classroom teachers, which I think was an important highlight. Yeshua and I decided every adult who was available, and obviously, of course, we have some office staff who can't, but has been paired with a classroom teacher. So interventionists are in classrooms, specials, UA teachers are in classrooms, my mental health team who can, when they can be here. So a lot of adults involved. So it's not just I do this in my classroom, it's part of my learning. It's a school-wide initiative. So we've paired up all the adults, and every Wednesday we do a lesson specifically around SEL. We use a program called Second Step. We've been using it loosely. That's the video. If you don't want to play it, you don't have to. It's just a nice man talking about all the features. But what it does is it breaks down each grade level and gives you specific units around certain skills. All of these lessons are aligned with our district standards, so we can look up exactly. We have a beautiful sheet where you can go across and say this lesson covers these standards within the district, so a crosswalk. So, and it's really nicely laid out. There's an introductory activity, some slides, some activities for the kids to do, and then it does provide follow-up activities you can do throughout the week to re-emphasize whatever you worked on Wednesdays. It's a really nice program. It's all digital. They did used to have a box component. We do get a lot of feedback. The early elementary box used to have puppets. People love their puppets and miss their puppets. Very, very fun thing. But otherwise, it's really nicely put together. It's very repetitive. It also builds upon the prior week's learning, so they're always getting a little bit of review plus new information. And it's really nice because we can track progress as well. So we can, as adults, see, and there's a lot of secondary and follow-up information that exists. The next step for me as we get further is I want to do a little bit more for parents to be in the know and get a little more information out to families about this. This particular program has some really great parent resources that I haven't had a full chance to dive into yet to get out to them, but it is the next iteration that I want to work towards, because what we're learning is that a lot of these skills are not present at home. Or it's funny because I always say, you know, when the homework debate comes up and we as adults sit down, like I can't support students sometimes in math because I can't do it the way they do it, and I was like, I want to help you, but I'm going to show you something you're not going to see again. It's not going to be helpful. I think SEL is similar. We have taken for granted, like I said, the human interaction component. And I always tell this funny story to my students. But I say, when I was a kid, every 2 weeks on Friday, I went to the bank. And I walked to the little bench and I sat in the corner while my mom walked up to the teller and cashed my dad's paycheck. And I learned to sit patiently, and I learned to read the room, and I learned what sounds and noises you do and don't make. And I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a TV. Kids are like, no phone, no TV, what the heck did you do? So for 5 to 7 minutes, I sat quietly observing the people around me and understanding what was going on. They're shocked by this. They can't imagine how I survived my childhood. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that's kind of one of those things. And as a parent who does this as a living, I still struggle. I mean, I'm like, okay, you're loud, it's a restaurant, here you go. I need to keep the peace, you know? So it is funny that even though I do it for a living, I fall under the same. So wanting to work with families a little more and give them more feedback and guidance around how to engage in this process. And I think one of the things that Steve was interestingly bringing up that I think of around HHP is there's a lot of misunderstanding about information and how it's presented. Often when I speak to kids about things, it'll start with, well, I saw this video. And I have to remind them that a video produced for content for the purpose of catching your eyeballs isn't always going to be something that translates naturally into the world you're in. And they kind of look at me and I'm like, you know, we consume content, but what's their purpose? Well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what are they trying to do? Well, they want you to look at it. Well, why? well, I don't know. Well, let's talk about advertising, right? It always translates into the purpose behind it. It's a really interesting to watch, especially in our 5th and 6th graders who are really always struggling with this because they're so inundated with the content, is to remind them like that video is not realistic to how a human interacts, because humans aren't looking to get your advertising dollars. So it's been an interesting journey to kind of relearn how to teach what we would consider basic manners and skills. What I will say has done, and we'll see the results of our first test, and we just finished our second test, and the results are looking really nice so far. Unfortunately, we won't get our final report until, I believe, late next week. It typically times out right before school ends, but when we process with children now, we are doing a much better job of understanding the why, because they now know I'd have the words and the skills to tell us what's going on. And so we're getting a lot deeper, and we're getting to a lot more purposeful conversation when we bring students back. In my early years here, it was a lot of kids would come, they would be away from the adult, they would calm down, they would want to get out of whatever consequence or discipline was going on, and you would return them back, and then 20 minutes later they would return because that relationship was still lacking. We've been able to do a much better job of understanding what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. They now have words and phrases and terms to give us, and we can really rely on that. We are, like the high school, struggling with the idea of nothing was done, because it's not exciting and obvious, and they don't drag kids out by their toenails and, do those things. We're really working on the person, not the consequence, right? We're trying to help the person be a better human being and understand how their choices impacted another person. And that's hard to see out in front unless you make a big dog and pony show. And I often try very hard not to do that, because once you've embarrassed a child, they're not likely to give you that information and see you as a support. They just see you as another obstacle. And that's a very scary thing when you know the next step is a phone somewhere in a corner in a room by themselves getting information. So it's a very delicate balance for us as a behavior team to make sure we're not convincing students that human interaction isn't worth their time, that they're going to get a better answer or find a better network of people they can work with outside of the adults around them. And you can go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, we can skip this nice girl who talks about. So again, we've really looked at what we can be doing positive, and you can skip to the next one because I kind of highlighted that. So this is our early results for this fall, and you'll see that bottom green number has really gotten very small, and it's never going to go away, because we do have students whose educational experience and their needs and their skills are going to make this a challenge for them no matter what we do to intervene. But I really like to see that light green, and you can see in most of the categories it's significantly grown, and we're really in year one of direct instruction yearly. I suspect that last graph that I can certainly share with you, Julie, when it comes out to show the board at the next meeting. We would be happy to do that. What I'm really excited about is seeing this cohort of kids starting in 2nd and 3rd and 4th after there've been 2 or 3 years of this. Where does that color scheme really go? I will say one fascinating thing we've been seeing that we're still trying to figure out. Our students have become very good at identifying and expressing what's going on. Replicating it in an emotional situation has been a different challenge. So a child will score very well on here, but then perform poorly at times in the classroom. And what we're discovering is it's not that they don't know what to do, it's that accessing that when feeling upset or mad can be very challenging. Which, one, I'm very glad that's what we're dealing with, because if we can solve that conundrum, we will really have students that will really be successful going forward. But it's a hardest thing about teaching this is you can never truly replicate the emotion you're going to feel when it's happening to you. Because when you do a video or you do a conversation, everyone's in a good space and they're here they're receptive and they're not feeling that emotion. So that is sort of the next iteration we're working on, and we're doing some great work now as a district team around tier 2 interventions, what we can do for kids to tackle that, but also talking about how can we try to work on this model a little bit to present more opportunities to practice in a calmer setting. And my team is doing some work this summer at one of our trainings that we attend every year to look at how can we do some skill building in the moment. When a student is out of class because of an event, what can we do to build them skills to send them back so they have a new tool the next time that thing happens, because most of these are reciprocal events. So we're really excited about that data, really excited about the work. I mean, I really just wanted to highlight really the staff and their commitment, once a week to sit down with kids and do this SEL work. It has been tremendously beneficial. The relationship building and the trust that our students have, and I think even a lot of our parents have. Yeshua will certainly attest to the number of things that I'm not necessarily sure are school business, but the things that get sent to us to deal with because we are so in tune. And on top of it, I sometimes I'm like, I just don't know if I can solve this problem. But ultimately, people feel good about what we do, and I think this has opened that door a little bit. And we still have a ways to go to get through it, but I just, because of the commitment the staff has made, I wanted the board to see and hear about that because it is a district initiative. But it is ultimately what's going to continue to move those behavior numbers in the right direction. It's a re-education for our students on how to navigate the emotional challenges they face and to give them more tools to see the benefit of personal human interaction as opposed to digital response to emotion.
Do we have someone in each of the other schools, Franklin and?
The program is across the district, but Highgate has, but I would say it's fair to say it's implemented unevenly across because there are a lot of things on teachers' plates. So this school did a really nice job of creating that Wednesday, drop everything and do SEL, right? So that's, I think, something that then gets shared with the other schools as a way to make sure that it's happening. It's happening with guidance counselors and so forth in the other schools.
So Eric, you're based here then?
I am, yeah.
Here.
I am the SEL coordinator, so it is one of my many roles, but it's also something I do fully believe in and want to see for our students. I am fortunate because I wear many hats that I am the one sitting across from students often when they're in crisis and having those conversations, and so I've gotten to see directly the benefits of some of that work within our kids and have gotten the opportunity to really hear some kids. Even as an example today, a student was talking about feeling like an adult's not hearing him specifically and that there's some inequity in the way things are processed. And 4 years ago, that would have been that adult and a bunch of bleeps I can't say and lots of paperwork. And now it's a very calm student who's still not getting an answer he's ready to hear, but is able to say, this is what I'm feeling, and hear some really thought out words on how I can express that. And it's like, wow, I mean, that's a big step in the right direction. Like, we all are going to struggle with relationships and see things differently. And so I'm really glad you trust enough in me to share that information. And I want to help you try to figure that out and work through it. So those little things that come up with students, we use what we call a planning room, which for me is really just a private place to have conversations. And it used to be a place we had full all the time, and now we barely use it. And when we do, kids are okay to go there because they see it as a stop to a solution, as opposed to you go here because you've done something wrong. Yeah. And that shift in culture has really impacted our whole community and how kids feel and the way we do things. Our numbers in comparison to MVUs would be much bigger, but we over-document on purpose because we want to catch trends, right? We're looking to find those moments where we can jump in and save a young person before they get too far down the line, and we can say, whoa, what's going on here that's causing this? And more often than not, school issues are not the number one thing that come up. More and more we're seeing issues outside of school or home issues or even things that are not controllable, the challenges of two working parents and the time shuffle and the commitment to athletics and with the variety of athletics, like the days of everyone coming to baseball and everyone being together. I mean, like horseback riding and archery and rock climbing and fencing and I can't keep up with all the things our students in that time commitment, which is wonderful for families to make, but does degrade and take away from that family time and put people under a lot of stress. And then obviously, of course, the number of non-traditional families that we have where we're working on sharing. So there's multiple households, multiple sets of rules, and then school's the third place that has rules and things. So, but we're getting to understand that, and we're getting to have more impactful conversations with students around those things that I hope will continue to do good things for them. And like I said, starting this year with our youngest kids, seeing where they are in 5 or 6 years after having done this direct work for a long period of time is very exciting and the early numbers are telling us it's going to be beneficial, but we'll see where that leads to as we add those other tiers and other supports with our students. In the hopes that MVU will also see that as well. We can keep that train rolling and really continue to reduce those numbers.
Is availability of food an issue?
So right now, we have not run into that. Certainly, the state continuing to offer free lunch for all students has taken a lot of stress off not only our students, but families trying to make that choice of hot versus not hot. The school snack programs are well stocked and well taken care of. I know that's a questionable program going forward. I hope that they vote to continue it, but I know there's been some talk of maybe shifting that, but we have not seen that as of recent, Don. Like I said, more of our students, it's they try to apply social media response culture in school and get called out for it, and we have to work through, like, just because you saw that video doesn't mean you can call your friend X name. Obviously, in the political climate, there's been a lot more conversations around race and ethnicity that we're now tackling with students and sort of trying to navigate that, and we're finding a lot of our students have found their way to satirical content, and that's been an interesting conversation, especially in our older students, trying to make jokes about border crossings and things that are thrown at them on a regular and not having any understanding of what they're actually saying and what they're representing. So but that's the nature of the beast. I think, we've always had something we're working on, and there's always some challenge that our students are facing, and so we're having to pivot and shift with them as we go. But my hope was their continued comfortability with feelings and emotions and more opportunities to practice and share allows those conversations to be a lot more purposeful and a lot more long-term beneficial than a traditional, you did this, you have a consequence, go here, don't do it again. But we're now starting to give them solutions, because they're now able to say, this is what I'm like. That's a big deal if you're feeling that. Let's talk about that big thing. No, you can't do these 3 things, but let's also hone in on that thing that's bugging you and give you some purposeful answers. And similar to MVU, we're trying to find more ways to offer information and content to help them learn what they're doing and why it's impactful from the human side, as opposed to sort of whatever their exposure may be from an external source. So.
Does English as a second language play out here?
We have not run into too much of that, no. All the students I work with speak English well. We've had a few ESL students, but most of them at this point speak we have a few families that are harder to communicate with because of that. But we've traditionally found,
like the white building in like a room by themselves.
Yeah, so we do use it. It's our planning room. They're never there totally alone. There's always an adult with them. Typically, we have a small period just to allow them to cool down, and then we speak with them as quickly as possible. In our behavior matrix over time, Rennick, we've eliminated as much time out of class as humanly possible. Obviously not only from our own experience, but research tell you that exclusatory practices don't benefit students. What we do is when they're away, we really are trying to figure out what they need. One thing we've been really trying to do is get away from the kid that comes, has a strong relationship with me, talks with me, goes back to class, repeats a behavior, because the relationship breakdown's not between me and that student, but rather the adult at the front of the room. And so we really try to make sure we work through those things and have a plan. We have a re-entry process, so whenever a student returns to class, we try to pull the adult out briefly and make sure that student and that adult have a quick conversation, touch base on whatever situation has occurred, to try to rebuild that relationship.
What's the longest kids will spend in that room?
If a kid certainly reaches a point where we're talking about a suspension, where they've had a number of visits, we do certainly have kids that have in-school suspensions for the day or half a day. I would say generally, if you look at just a regular situation, it's anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Some kids it's much shorter if they're able to say, hey, I came over, this happened, I know what went wrong. A lot of times, to be quite honest, we have to give the adults a slightly longer cool down period than the students actually need. Because the students themselves can acknowledge, I did this I shouldn't have, but the disruption to the overall classroom can be a little more challenging for the adult, and the concern about returning and having a continued disruption can take a little time for adults to feel good about and ready to. It also can be challenging not to take away from the learning of all. If you come back 5 minutes later and you pull the teacher, now they're not giving direct instruction, that's impacting. So it can be a little bit tricky timing.
You're talking about how long a student is out of class processing.
Correct.
I think Rennick's question is about seclusion.
We have not done any.
I'm just asking because I hear stories of kids being sort of sent to this quote unquote white room, white building, and for some,
we have not done any seclusions this year, which would be the legal state definition of a student in one side and adult on the other with the door closed and not being allowed to exit. As far as what we call 4,500, which is the physical management of students, outside of one student who has a one-to-one peer, I think we've done 3 the entire year. It might be 4 now. And none of them have lasted more than about 15 to 20 minutes.
And when kids, regardless of ages, misbehave, a lot of time taking away of recess is used. What's the theory behind that? And the only reason I ask is because, like, I think kids in general struggle with not being active and being busy and sitting down in a classroom for a long period of time. And I'll just say, I'll use my son as an example. He's busy. He just wants to run all day.
Yeah.
So, like, is that effective? Like, is there not another way, as opposed to saying, like, hey, your recess time, which for a lot of kids is their free time to be physical and run around, is there not another way as opposed to taking that away? Because, and I'm sure it's a difficult challenge.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, is there not something else?
It's a great question. I can't say, I mean, I will say that when we do, we don't just take recess away, we provide alternative recess. So it's typically some adults spending time with the kid doing some activity. So they're not just like, here, sit and read a book. We try to do something that has some movement activity or some kind of creativity with students. The hard part is that we don't have the adults, like, in a perfect world, I would send an adult to be a one-on-one with them for a recess period. If I just had unlimited adults, I'd send someone who could go out there and be a recess coach, right? That would be the terminology. So I could say, that interaction is where you went awry yesterday, let's practice. I don't have, unfortunately, the humans to do that. The challenge is there's so much going on at a recess, and when a student is struggling with a recess, and we don't take recess away unless something happened at recess.
It's like if
like
the common practice is not you did something in the classroom,
correct.
So recess is taken away.
Yeah.
Recess might be taken away because you shoved a kid while at recess. Right. So the next day, your natural consequence is to not have recess or an alternative recess.
Yeah.
That's
so we
good. That's good.
We don't use recess as a like, oh, I cursed in class, you don't get recess. No,
Right,
that's not how it works, right? Because again, the relationship that needs to be repaired is you cursed at that teacher, whatever got you upset, you and that teacher have to figure out. Because tomorrow, that's going to be the face waiting for you, and you need to be able to interact with them and work through whatever that was. And even if it, like, I was just mad at this work, well, that work's going to be there tomorrow. Let's tackle that problem. So we really do only take away recess when a recess issue has occurred. It can and can't be effective. It really depends on the circumstances. A lot of times what we find is that time away from recess generates a very productive conversation because the desire to get back to recess opens sometimes some doors for kids. I don't ever want kids to be without movement because they do have long learning academics and it isn't good for them not to move. It's the same with, like, we try never to pull kids out of UAs if we don't have to, right? I'm not like, oh, you acted up at 9 o'clock, I'm going to come find you at 11 during your UA, and that's when we're going to process, so you miss all your right? We work really hard not to do that for kids, and even if I'm doing like an investigation or a follow-up, I try never to pull kids during a UA unless it's a critical need, because that time left brain work is so important. I think it's always a work in progress. We haven't found a happy middle ground. Again, if we had more adults, we could talk about maybe an independent recess in a spot, but it's often there's just not enough humans to be able to say, I'm going to spend time with this kid while they're at recess, so they have that guidance and support. And I think to Steve's point earlier too, it's sometimes when students see a student who's not behaving at recess come back quickly, they're not always connecting the response. So it's not ideal, but it does show kids, hey, they didn't come to recess, clearly something happened, and we don't have to get into the weeds of like what they did while they were away. And many times our kids like, oh, that wasn't so bad, I had fun. Like, yes, we're not trying to torture you, right? We want recess to still exist. We just want you to realize that being around your peers comes with a secondary set of expectations that you have to meet. So, but I think always good conversation to be having, because certainly if kids are reporting the loss of recess impacting their school, then we want to have that discussion, because again, then we're undoing the work we're trying to do really hard with SEL, which is kids feeling that adults don't hear me or care about me or don't recognize me, which is what we're trying to break down. If you verbalize and communicate, we do want to hear you, recognize you, and give you a solution. So our days of secluding and restraining kids and taking away the things they love has severely diminished. I will say it's not everyone's favorite thing about school sometimes. There are still some adults who feel like we're a little too easy and a little too kind, especially on students who are repeat offenders, but I have a hard time saying that a kid not learning is somehow making them better student, like sitting with me or being out of class. They're here to be in school. We need to make that the priority as much as possible, as long as they're not being unsafe and jeopardizing. But it's a work in progress. I'm very fortunate to have a team that's very creative, and we come up with a lot of ways to support students to get them what they need. And so I think we've really, like I said, we've reduced, and we're actually, Rusty just helped me build the form that tracks our time out of class for students. So we're actually starting to look at who are our repeat offenders and how much academic time are they missing to start using as a data point for discussions with adults to say, just so you know, this student has missed 265 minutes. It's something you want to consider when you're saying, can we keep them out more, or this not working? Like, well, part of it is they've missed 265 minutes. It's a compounding. You want them gone because they're struggling, but while they're gone, they come back with new struggles. We're not actually switching. So continuing to chase that middle ground of where's enough time and too much time, and how to really support students work through those complicated things and navigate the challenge of being a young student in a world I'm glad I didn't grow up in, I'll say that much, and I'm not that old, so yeah. Any other questions I can answer?
The comment that you and Yesha made makes me feel real good, because I haven't heard it recently, and I haven't heard it ever from Highgate, but the idea that student maybe, I say through food, did something that was not good, and they lost their recess. To me, there's no connection between that, but I know it happens in schools.
Yeah, it's a low hanging fruit when you don't really want to understand what's going on, to just take that away. And it's funny because as you give these students more tools and tricks, they can use them against you, right? They're being like, why are you taking my recess away? That doesn't make sense. I didn't, they start using the terms and the words, and they're starting to become more self-aware of some of that. So it can be challenging at times when the students are looking at you and be like, guess what I learned today? And you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't taught you that today. Could I wait until tomorrow? But yeah, and again, the more we're able to, and the relationship piece we all know, but I think what we're finding is the depth of what kids will share and what they're sharing with us has grown significantly, and that's really shaping the next iteration of what we're trying to do, is how do we take that heavy information that they're giving us and translate it into this performance. And I've had a couple of conversations with students around that, like, you're frustrated by this, but you're performing, which draws attention away from the thing that bugs you. And they're like, oh, right? They don't think of it that way. They want to express it like, right? I say it's like a temper tantrum, right? Your little one just wants you to know there's something going on, and they do something to draw your attention. And even our older students are similar. They're doing something to draw your attention, but unfortunately that usually trumps what's really their need. So they do that, they get in trouble, and then when you finally backtrack, you're like, okay, so that peer said that to you? What if you try this? And then you have to work through that. And they have to do it repetitively, right? Because the first time, well, they just said knock it off and it didn't work. You're right. That did happen, right? There's going to be a sequence of building up. We have to be consistently doing the same thing to see those actions work their way through. So,
Well, thank you.
Very good.
yeah, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were doing it. I was like, oh, I get a break tonight.
Oh, well, I don't care.
All right. I guess we have next is business office. I don't see Laura.
I got it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, you want to read the check warrants, please, Elaine?
Yes, I will. For the month of May, accounts payable, $2,273,895.04. Payroll checks, $33,416.25. Payroll other disbursements, $1,684,057.92. And payroll deductions, $751,147.06, for a total of $4,742,516.27.
Can I get a motion to approve the check warrants as read?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the check warrants, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. 6 now?
There's
Yes.
no number 9.
there's,
The next one, there's no professional hires.
okay.
That was a change.
Alright, so motion carries 6-0 and no professional hires. Really, Bonnie? What's going on?
When you do the
We hired
meetings back
everybody.
to back, I need
I don't know.
We do
Okay.
have somebody I'm going to be meeting with, so that we should have somebody for our next meeting.
Ah, okay, it was a pretty good string for a while. Alright.
Busy.
Yeah. Next, so superintendent evaluation, I added that. It really is just a timeline question, so that we can just all be on the same page for timeline. We've done it differently kind of every year. And last year I think we had one main evaluation and then sort of like a checkpoint. And so I just wanted to get the time, sort of the time frames on there. And then, anything to do with process we can discuss another time, but I think having.
So this is a checkpoint? You're
No,
looking for a date for?
No, I just wanna establish when they are, honestly, for the year, right? Like, so that Julie, knows ahead of time, and that we are all sort of, and I can do the work. We have the process, we've done that, we've had the forms, it's been working pretty well. I just wanna make sure that we know, that way it's out there and, it's not last minute. That's the main thing. So, the main one, in my opinion, like we always do, should be done ahead of town hall,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Not after. I think there was one year where.
So we have all the original board members
Exactly,
still.
yeah. It doesn't make sense for a new
Doing-
board to
yeah.
be doing evaluations of a superintendent they haven't worked with, right? So that should be finished prior to town hall, and then there's also contract renewal and all that stuff. So if, the main one was finished somewhere in the, I imagine, December to February timeframe, that would be done. And-
January, February.
Yep, that would be done ahead, and then some sort of a checkpoint before then. Doesn't have to be a full evaluation, but something to just sort of say, hey, we're on track, we're doing, things are going the way they should. So I just want to establish the timeline, and then that way it's known, Julie knows, we know, and it's nothing last minute and rushed, and then I can work on kind of fleshing out and having a process so that any new future board or chairs can have that to use. And I have been waiting because the VSBA have they come out with their standards yet? Because they were supposed to come out with them.
The Vermont, the governance standards. I was just at a meeting on Friday where people were reviewing the draft rubrics, so I don't know where they are with that. They're very aspirational.
Okay. So, thoughts? We could have, the main evaluation for the year complete and done by January, February, and then some sort of a checkpoint before then, maybe August, September timeframe.
Certainly before we get into another school year very far, so probably August, early September. I guess I'd ask Julie. At one time, this was maybe years ago, I'm not even sure it was this kind of the board since we merged, but we used to try to take and do something near the end of the year, but now the end of the year seems so crazy that we don't do it.
The end of the year, the issue is that March, we've just had town hall, we've just gone through voting, then you roll into April and May, it's the end of the year.
If the budget gets approved.
If the budget gets
plan to
approved.
roll
Yeah, I think
April
the year
and
the
May.
budget, when the budget went down a year ago, everything kind of got skewed.
Yeah.
We still budget.
Focus is somewhere else.
Well,
So-
and you have, a statutory time, boards have a statutory time when you need to let the superintendent know whether you're gonna renew or not. So it makes sense for an evaluation to follow that. Whether it's a 1-year cycle or a 2-year cycle, you've done both.
Yep.
But we could do a goal check-in in the fall. Again, I'll leave it to the board
Yeah.
as to what you wanna do.
A question I have that's related to that. July usually not a heavy-duty board meeting month. Are we planning this year strategic planning and one board meeting or no board meeting and strategic planning?
So we have the retreat in July,
Yeah.
and
is it-
then the strategic plan, I believe we've been
We're gonna
invited
do
to
in
that
August.
in August with the directors and
Right.
Julie. So I think we already have those on the book.
So we only have in July, then we have one gathering.
Right. That's the way we've been doing it for, I
Yeah,
don't know, 5,
a
6
num-
years.
many years, right. I'm not looking for another meeting, but it seems like maybe in July and August, we could find a time. I don't, maybe an August board meeting to do a checkpoint.
Okay.
I don't see it being too heavy duty. In fact, from my point of view, I would like to hear from Julie at that point, how she feel the year went and how she felt
Yeah.
about what she said she wanted to do.
Well, so I like that idea. So what we can do is have some sort of a checkpoint end of August, early September, which can be also like you said, goal setting, review, check in. The board can weigh in on sort of like what they think, how it's been going, what they see, all that, and then we can have the main evaluation done and complete sometime January, February. And, you know, knowing how things roll out and when we push the information out to board members, they have time to consider, we come back, we deliberate, we do all that stuff, so that'd be a time frame.
Sounds good.
Okay, yeah, that was all, I just wanted to get that out there and clear, so we're all
Yeah,
tracking.
because it was hard for me last year to fill it out. when-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Because
was
we,
like, I don't
we
know.
did it after we were on the board for 2
Yeah.
months. It's like, well,
didn't-
like,
It didn't make sense, and what if the board is good, what I'd like to do is sort of just have that, so that if the entire board changes or however, this is the process that we've been following, and it's up to them if they wanna choose to just follow that too. Because I don't feel like we had that.
Can we at some point look at the evaluation form, because
So that would be part of it,
you
so I
know, we
would,
need to, because there was something in there, like extremely good, very good, almost good, or not good. And it's-
Not good at all.
It's kind of like, well, like they're talking about a kid. I had a bad day today, and I came to a board meeting. Is she extremely good? Well, she was for 360 days, but she really fell up
Today,
today.
not yesterday, she was.
So let's look
well,
at that form.
yeah, and there's a whole toolkit
Yeah.
available to look at. So again, the process we can look at and discuss, but
Yeah,
I just wanted the
that'd
time
be
frame
good.
to be in place. Because I didn't like how it's rushed, right? Hey, 2 weeks we're doing an evaluation.
That's us as a board, not us. That's the way school boards work. They wait until the last possible minute.
And the other thing too, because also Julie's been doing a good job of her evaluations, so I think we should have a fair and timely evaluation process. Okay, next there was a request for Franklin Rec Department info.
Yeah, that's not anything for the board to have action on, but it's a few years ago, Franklin Rec Department has been doing the 5th and 6th grade basketball and soccer for many years. We pay for the uniforms and the balls and things like that. We have recently hired one individual to do Swanton and Highgate Rec. And you know, we advertised for that, and just because turnover. And Franklin approached us and said, you know, actually, we'd love to give soccer and basketball back, and we think it's more equitable if the school district is, you know, going to manage it. We asked them to formally discuss that. You know, we didn't want it just to be one individual, but they did discuss it at their meeting yesterday, and they are asking either if we do it right away or if we do sort of a soft rollout over the next year. So we are planning. It's a stipended position. It's not a position like the high school athletic director is. And so we think it's a good idea. I think it will actually help streamline, and mostly kids play each other, so I think that will help. But we have to work through things with the individual, and if it's, you know, we think it will work, but we wanted to make sure, because we didn't want it to just be out in the community in Franklin, well, all of a sudden they've taken something away or we're doing something different. We were asked to.
Is it 2 sports, soccer and
Yes.
basketball?
Yep. 5th and 6th grade basketball and soccer and basketball.
I think this actually came up a few years ago. I think Devin might have brought it up because there wasn't enough kids in Franklin to
They
play
never
a certain
are. Right.
sport, I don't remember
We
those
have to do
boys
a
what
lot
it
of-
was, and then there was some conflict. For whatever reason, there was some conflicts of, well, we only have 4 kids, where are they gonna go? They're gonna go to Highgate and play, or are they gonna go to Swanton? And so that's why Devin was also asking if
Right.
it could kind of be unified.
We
That
have
would be-
worked,
yeah.
you may remember a few years ago, Justina was sort of coordinating things so that things like Swanton had, I'm gonna exaggerate for effect. Swanton would have like 100 practices for soccer and, or games, and Highgate had, 20. There was really not any kind of balance.
Yeah, okay, good.
The co-ed thing, I
Yeah.
mean, some people, there are strong opinions, even though it's 5th and 6th grade, there are strong opinions about things. But, I believe that if 4 kids wanna show up and play basketball, we gotta figure out how 4 kids can play basketball, and if it's co-ed, okay, if it's, we're gonna have a Highgate Franklin combined team,
Right,
we
whatever
can
works.
do that.
Right.
But that, I think, will allow people to problem solve that, and, just allow as many kids to be active and have fun, which
Yep.
is the point.
No, take it away.
I didn't like the idea of junior high boys and girls playing together because the girls beat the hell out of the boys.
They're taller.
They're so much taller.
That's right, they are, and I'm serious, I coached, and I mean, it was terrible. Some of those little guys go home crying because some girl knocked him down and stepped on him.
Okay. Alright, well, okay.
So, just wanted to make sure you folks were aware.
Perfect. So, future agenda items, we have Franklin Wellness presentation and the end of year presentation.
Absolutely.
Anything else to add?
No, really, the end of your data presentation, Kosha and Bonnie will be doing retention information, we'll have attendance information, so it's a lot of information.
Alright, future board meeting, so in 2 weeks, it'll be at Franklin
Yep.
on the 17th. And then we had on here, we'd like to confirm the retreat date. We were going back and forth between the 16th and the 9th. So I think the majority last time were good with the 16th, but we were missing a couple members, still are, so can
I'm
we?
good with either date. I don't have anything planned.
Was there a conflict on the 9th for
I
anyone?
think
Or
there
was it the other way
was.
around?
No, there was a conflict on the 9th. Yeah, and the only thing was, I think Joanne mentioned that's your vacation week, but
That's okay.
is it a vacation in place?
It's, yes,
It doesn't matter.
it's okay.
I didn't say it, I just was asking.
I'll bring cake, it'll just
Where are
be
you
like-
going? Can we go with you?
Well, I mean, like we'll make it special, we'll make it a Hawaiian retreat, okay?
Well, I'll wear.
Hawaiian shirts, there you go.
Just like the senior night they just had.
If you schedule it at least a year in advance, you can come to Concord, Maine, but you'd have to be a year in advance.
I'm gonna,
Because all
I'll be
the,
here.
I really
I
think
saw
we
my
should
dad
have them in our community and
Yeah, I do too.
not out of state. think
I
that's
mean, Maine
too
is
retreat.
lovely.
Maine-
I would happily go to a Gunkway.
Oh, yeah, I'm right there with you.
We do, we should be able to have the Abby and Debbie Singizer she held both dates for me until we decided.
And Debbie's okay with both
With
dates?
either, yep.
So, I noticed Pierrette said the 16th was fine. Peter would have been at last week's meeting, so he was fine with the 16th, so it's just, did Tracy, on that string of emails, did
I
Tracy
reached out to her,
reply back?
I don't
I
remember if she
think-
did.
I don't have a reply from Tracy.
Well, what I'd like to do, can we just set the 16th?
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
do it.
And then we'll just, if we have to adjust or someone can't attend or something, we'll deal with it at that time.
That's a Wednesday, right?
It's a Wednesday.
Yeah.
It is a Wednesday because the Abbey isn't open on Monday and Tuesday. And we like to use, I like the
I like Wednesday.
space is good.
Could you just see if it's really hot, if we're not in that back room?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I remember. So I
We were
am
sticking to the
hoping we can
seats.
maybe use the larger space
Sure.
because there's more airflow
Oh,
there.
in the front, like
Yeah.
the real hall, the dining room.
Like the, where,
Where we
the
usually-
banquet
Where we
area.
eat?
Where we gather in the beginning, right?
And does Debbie plan
that
on
would be
bringing any
noisy
sort of
with the bar.
video
No.
presentation?
Not there.
I don't know.
Can
Well,
you
they
ask?
have
Because
concerts and
if we need to bring
bands and
something,
stuff. And like wedding.
Right, it would be
wedding
helpful to get it
receptions.
set up ahead of time so Julie's not dragging it in her car.
Banquet room, yeah.
I don't know.
Because that usually is not
I
very
get lost
pretty.
every
We
time I
went
go
through the
there.
big room to get to the little room when we were.
Yeah,
Oh, down there.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and the only other thing would be times. Usually in the past, we've started at 5 o'clock or 5:30. different to our 6 o'clock meeting.
Right.
So that would be the other thing to make sure if
Right.
people
We
are
can
working
get-
until 5 or
Can
that would be another question for.
Well, I know I had, that's fine.
we do 5:30? It's hard for me to get up here earlier than that.
I think
I'm
we
on
can make
vacation.
5:30 work.
We can do whatever.
Joanne's flexible.
So and what I would say is there a way to set up potentially, because you know how we eat and then we go and we do the retreat, is there a way to like set up so we can just eat and kind of like get
Be
right
in
in
the same space.
and just get right into it? That way, you know, we
Well,
don't
that's
lose-
why I was hoping, I don't know yet, but that's why I was hoping we could use the larger space, because we have done that, and it's been a while, but
Yeah, the
we-
first year,
Yeah.
it was catered out to us. It was like a
Right.
buffet style. We
It's-
went up, we ate.
It's very nice in the
Yes.
other area, but people are coming and going, and we're really just but that way we could be talking about things and looking at
Yeah.
a slide presentation while we eat,
Multitasking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
instead of then getting up and moving.
I like that better.
All right, so we'll say
I'll
5:30.
get Jerry on it.
We'll say 5:30 the 16th. Set. And anything else from anyone?
Peter's not here, what will we do?
Staff?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
7:41.
I told you it could be early
Thank you,
today.
Megan.
Right.
No offense, Brendan.
That's right.